Have you ever stopped to think about how a musician can completely transform a style and create something truly unique in the process? Horace Silver did exactly that. He didn't just play jazz, he shaped a new way of feeling it. With soulful melodies and rhythms that combined simplicity and energy, he helped transform bebop into what we now know as hard bop. But who was Horace Silver beyond the piano? What made him stand out in such a competitive scene? Stick with me, because his story is sure to surprise you. Horace Ward Martin Tavares Silva, better known as Horace Silver. Horace Silver was born on September 2nd, 1928, in Norwalk, Connecticut, USA. The son of a Cape Verdean father and an American mother, he grew up in an environment where diverse cultures converged, something that would later profoundly influence his musical style. From a young age, Horace showed an interest in music, but it wasn't the piano that he started with. In fact, he first learned to play the tenor saxophone before being encouraged to explore the piano, a decision that ultimately defined his career. His father, an avid enthusiast of Cape Verdean folk music, introduced him to rhythms and melodies that would later be reflected in his compositions. A curious story about his youth is that, as a teenager, Horace would often practice piano secretly in a local church. He was captivated by the sound of the instrument, little knowing that one day he would become one of the greatest names in jazz. The turning point in Horace Silver's rise to fame came in 1950, when he was discovered by Stan Getz at a local club in Hartford, Connecticut. Getz, impressed by Silver's unique style, which blended the energy of bebop with rhythmic influences from Cape Verde, invited him to join his band. This invitation not only expanded Silver's visibility in the jazz world, but also gave him the confidence to focus exclusively on piano and composition. Horace had the privilege of working with brilliant artists who shaped his music. Among them was Art Blakey, with whom he co-founded the Jazz Messengers, a group that would become a cornerstone of hard bop. Blakey was not only a musical partner, but also a model of leadership and energy on stage. Other significant figures in his journey included Miles Davis and Dizzy Gillespie, who influenced his ability to create striking compositions with an unmistakable sense of swing. Horace was known for breaking conventions by giving greater emphasis to melody and groove in his compositions, contrasting with the pure technical virtuosity of bebop. He initially faced resistance for his style, which incorporated elements of blues, gospel, and folk music, something some critics viewed as simplistic. However, he believed that music should be accessible and emotional, and this principle became his trademark. His recordings with the Jazz Messengers, especially the 1955 album Horace Silver and the Jazz Messengers, stunned audiences and set a new direction for jazz. Tracks like The Preacher were bold in their contagious simplicity, captivating listeners. This approach challenged the notion that jazz had to be complex to earn respect, and proved that emotion and groove were equally powerful forces. In the later years of his life, Horace Silver lived more reclusively, away from the spotlight that had defined his career. Although he remained a revered figure in the jazz world, he faced significant health challenges. He suffered from persistent issues, including degenerative neuropathy, which limited his ability to play piano and perform. This withdrawal was a heavy blow for an artist whose life revolved around music. Nevertheless, Silver stayed active as a composer and mentor. He continued to write music and inspire new generations of musicians, sharing his unique vision of jazz. Even though he was no longer on stage, His influence was deeply felt by students and professionals who looked to his works as a standard to follow. Horace Silver passed away on June 18, 2014, at the age of 85, in his home in New Rochelle, New York. His death was attributed to natural causes, though the weight of his health issues was well known among close friends and family. While there were no major controversies surrounding his passing, many fans were surprised by the lack of initial media attention, sparking discussions about how jazz is treated in the modern cultural landscape. The news of his death was met with sadness from the public and reverence from his fellow musicians. Prominent jazz figures paid tribute, highlighting not only his musical contributions, but also his generous personality and his role in shaping the sound of hard bop. The jazz world lost one of its greatest innovators, but Horace Silver's music lives on in performances, recordings, and the memories of those touched by his artistry. His passing served as a reminder of the importance of preserving and celebrating the history of jazz, while it remains a vibrant part of our cultural heritage. Horace Silver's music was an explosion of emotion and rhythm, something that touched the soul of anyone who listened. In the 1950s and 60s, he brought something fresh and distinct to jazz, which was becoming increasingly complex and intellectual. Instead of following the fast-paced technical path of bebop, Silver chose a more straightforward approach, focusing on groove and melody, elements that appealed to both musicians and casual listeners. His compositions, with their simple yet powerful lines, quickly secured a permanent place in the heart of jazz. They represented a new era where music could be both sophisticated and accessible. A clear example of Silver's influence on other pianists is the story of McCoy Tyner, one of jazz's greatest names. Tyner, who became famous as John Coltrane's pianist, consistently acknowledged Horace Silver's importance in his development. In interviews, he mentioned that Silver's simplicity and emotional strength were a major inspiration for him. Tyner, known for his impressive technique and powerful chords, often stated that Silver taught him how to speak through music, to infuse every chord with feeling, and to understand the piano's role within an ensemble. Their connection went beyond what Tyner could put into words. He simply embodied Silver's style in his own playing, creating a bridge between the traditional and experimental worlds of jazz. For Tyner, Silver was like a guiding light, helping him find his own voice on the piano. How did Horace Silver take the complexity and intensity of bebop and transform them into something more accessible, emotional, and powerful, creating hard bop, a style that still resonates in the music we hear today? Horace Silver didn't just make history. He rewrote the rules of jazz, showing the world that music could be profound and simple at the same time. His ability to transform bebop's complexity into something tangible, with rhythms that reached deep into the soul, was a quiet revolution. But the true magic of his work isn't limited to what he achieved in his era. Silver carved out a new path that continued to influence musicians born long after his rise, shaping the sounds of jazz that we still hear today. His music has no expiration date. It remains relevant, like an endless conversation. When you listen to his compositions now, think about the transformation he brought to jazz, not as something from the past, but as something alive, constantly finding new ways to express itself. What will you hear the next time you play a Horace Silver record? I promise it'll be more than just notes and chords. It'll be the voice of a man who, unknowingly, created a path that will never disappear. If you've connected with Horace Silver's story and want to keep learning about the figures who shaped jazz and the music we hear today, subscribe to the channel. Don't let the music stop here.